in 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. This episode is brought to you by Devos Outdoor, your go-to source for lightweight, portable, and versatile lighting solutions built for the outdoors and beyond. Whether you need scene lighting for public safety emergencies or reliable area lighting for your campsite, Devos has you covered. Their LED lanterns offer variable outputs and color options with Bluetooth remote controls that provide a complete ecosystem of lighting in a compact and easy-to-deploy package. These lights are perfect for camping, hunting, search and rescue, crime scene processing, and nighttime operations. Devos optimizes your experience and alleviates your pain points with extra power banks, solar panels, and more. Devos Outdoor ensures that you have long-lasting portable lighting no matter where you are. Check out their lineup at Devos, D-E-V-O-S, outdoor.com or find them on Amazon. Again, that's Devos, D-E-V-O-S, outdoor.com. This episode was also brought to you by Loa Boots. Start your day off on the right foot with footwear that was designed for those who stand relentlessly in the face of adversity. I wear Loa every single day, for miles on canine searches and for hours on tactical operations in inclement weather. No matter what, Loa keeps me moving. Whether you run, hike, hunt, or fight, on the streets or out in the woods, Loa has the gear you need to help you conquer whatever challenges you face. Go check out their new line of trail running shoes at Loa Boots, L-O-W-A boots.com, and get outside for some fresh air and daylight. Loa, for those who know where they're going and won't stop until they get there.
On this episode, we're going to talk about hazing. Hazing is a funny thing because words mean things, and hazing is one of those things that, like, it means whatever you want it to mean, depending on the context, who you're around, what their background is. There's the hazing that, like, football teams do their new guy in high school. And then there's like hazing. Like, I remember there's this big scandal when we were in high school. The Marine Corps was punching parachute wings into their new guys when they got their jump wings.
Oh, yeah.
And that was big drama. These guys who we expect to like jump into combat and get shot at and step on landmines, we were really, really upset that they got little pinpricks in them. That was very upsetting. But words mean things, and the word hazing tends to come with legal and procedural triggers because there are rules about it, right? Now, are we talking some sort of abusive behavior, or are we making the new guy go find a bucket of jet wash or 69 yards of flight line, or fill out the ID-10T form, right?
When I was, the one when I was working at the ambulance company back in the day was the new hire EMTs. You tell them go get fallopian tubes out of the back of the rig.
Nice. Nice. So is that hazing? Yeah, well, like by some definition, yeah, it is.
You're fucking
but is
with
that
the new
really
guy
what
a
we're
little
talking
bit,
about? Yeah. You know, as long as it's with love and a good, clean fun, it's probably not, but there's definitely a line, and we got to figure out where that line is. So that's what we're going to try and talk about on this episode. A lot of what I consider really valuable and maybe life-saving training gets lumped in with this because intense training looks intense, and it can be way, way, way too intense for some people, especially if it is done poorly. And not all training is done well, it turns out. But intense training tends to get lumped in with abuse a lot, and I think that's a problem. So yeah, words mean things. And they mean different things to different people. Like I said, one of my goals here is to help you sort out a working and a shared conception of hazing. So, the military is my background, and it's the context through which I look at these things. The Department of Defense does have a definition of hazing, and it says it's a form of harassment that includes conduct through which service members or DoD employees without a proper military or other governmental purpose. Let me say that again because it's really important. Without a proper military or other governmental purpose, but with a nexus to military service in some way connected to military stuff, physically or psychologically injures or creates a risk of physical or psychological injury to service members for the purpose of initiation into, admission into, affiliation with, change in status or position within, or a condition for continued membership in any military or DoD civilian organization. Man, you can tell lawyers wrote that. Okay. So let me go through kind of the elements of that. Involves members of the organization without a proper purpose. Doesn't define what that is. Cool. Physically or psychologically injures or might physically or psychologically injure. Okay, so there has to be like an actual injury, actual damage. Okay. And some initiation, right? It's about coming into or getting promoted in or getting the next badge or welcome to the team. Now we're going to mess with you, something like that. There's some initiation ritual happening, okay? And that traditionally included stuff like any form of congratulatory act that involves physically striking or threatening to do the same. So we're going to put your new rank on you and we're going to slug you real hard in the arm. That's hazing. Well, okay, cool. That is a softer and gentler military than even I have been in, and I am in the Air Force, for crying out loud. Pinning or tacking on any object into another person's skin. So if we're punching a hole in you, that's a sign. Okay, I can see that. Berating of another person with the purpose of belittling or humiliating them. Well, it's an awful lot of my military career that takes out debriefs from every time I've ever gone through pilot training. But I think what they were meaning is stuff like from Full Metal Jacket, the opening scene where he's like, "You're so ugly you could be a modern art masterpiece. I'll bet, your steers and queers come from Texas," that kind of thing. Okay. Encouraging another person to engage in illegal, harmful, demeaning, or dangerous acts. Stuff like you're not in the unit until you climb the flagpole naked. Yeah.
Okay, Jim.
Yeah, at what point does it stop being a prank, and at what point does it start being like, yeah, okay, let's not sexually assault the noobs. Okay, cool. There's a lot of nudity in basic training, has been my experience. Playing abusive or malicious tricks. Again, there's a line. How about branding, handcuffing, duct taping, tattooing, shaving, greasing, or painting another person? Yeah, most of those suck. Getting duct tape to the flagpole. There's always something with flagpoles, nudity, and duct tape. Like, it's amazing how fast that becomes a factor. Excessive or abusive use of water. I think that's just SEAL training or PJ training. Like, it just is. Okay. Forced consumption of food, alcohol, drugs, or another substance. Yeah, your next rank is at the bottom of this bottle of vodka. You get it at the end. Well, yeah, if you send the guy to the hospital with alcohol poisoning, you're probably not doing much to help the organization, right? So, yeah, that is the strict military definition. But again, the word hazing changes with every context and audience. So kind of bear with us as we explore the space on hazing on this episode. So that definition brought up this like initiation thing. Like, what do you do with the new guy, or when they get promoted, or when they get new, brand new to the unit, or go through basic training? So that to me sounds like onboarding. So this is talent management at the end of the day. What are we doing with our talent? And are we thoughtful about that? Or are we just beating up the new guy? And why? And just good, clean fun. Someone did it to me. I don't know. There is some value in having the new guys pay their dues. Up to a point. Why? Why do we want the new guys to pay their dues? Because something given just doesn't have much value. And you want them to mentally assign some value in being there. And it's psychology. We want them to have to take some sense of ownership, and it's just like, hey, yeah, welcome to the team. Well, we'll see you at 8:30 Monday morning. Have fun. humans don't develop attachment that way. They just don't.
Yeah, you need some investment, right? It's like the sunk cost bias. And I also think in terms of onboarding, part of it is to indoctrinate the new guys into the culture of whatever team or organization you're talking about. And there's value there too.
Yeah, and consider what culture you're trying to create and indoctrinate them into. Is it a culture of just child abuse?
Right.
Maybe not.
Yeah. There's another distinction I think we have to make here that matters in terms of onboarding, and that's the difference between what you might consider hazing or whatever and rites of passage. And rites of passage is kind of a more formal or official one. Like you talk about like the Navy SEALs have Hell Week, right? And it's kind of a rite of passage. The police academy, SWAT school, those are rites of passage. They are intended to be difficult, and there could be practices embedded in those things that might be considered hazing. But I think you have to kind of look at that distinction a little bit. The distinction is the actual like process of a SWAT school or an academy or even something like a Hell Week, right? If it like Jim said in that definition, right, it serves some purpose, it's part of the training or the schooling, that's one thing, right? But then there's also just the basic treatment of the new guy who's otherwise completed the process, right? Like you make it through SWAT school, you make it through SEAL training, and now you're the new guy in the unit. And now it's no longer rite of passage so much, it's just how you treat the new guy. And I think one of the things about this is if the new guy gets treated differently than everyone else, you're kind of othering yourself a little bit. And that can just be inherently divisive. And that's not necessarily what you want. If you're trying to get someone into the culture to get buy-in, right, mentally, like Jim was describing, treating everyone different and not giving them like a seat at the table is problematic. So that being said, within your organization or team, you can have standards or expectations, and those should be consistent, right? This is the way we do things here. This is how the bar is set for everybody. And I'll just use examples from like my fire service buddies. They have a pretty unique culture because they get to live together basically in a house, right? For 10 days a month or whatever it is they work. And if you have a fire crew and they've got a new guy, the probie, right? The probationary firefighter that shows up in there and he's expected to cook and clean and just sit in the corner and color when everyone else is screwing around, being lazy, having a good time. Consider what that does to their psychology differently than when the probie shows up and they constantly see everyone hustling and busting their ass. They're all cooking, pitching in, all cleaning, helping each other out. And he's going to have that like felt need to participate, right? Like, oh dude, I need to step up, right? And feel part of this group. And at some point they start doing it on their own and they start to feel more kind of welcome and a part of something. Now, there's different philosophies people can have in any given team or organization or unit, right? But I will tell you that with my team, like I want my new teammates to know that I'm here for them, that they're welcome to be here, that they've earned it, that they have a voice, that we picked them for a reason and that we value them. And we've got a saying on my team that you're always on probation, right? No one has a right to be here. We're all here voluntarily. We all worked hard to get here. You got to earn it and you got to want it every day, but we're always going to be here for each other. But that being said, no one comes before the team, right? Compromising the team or the values of the team will not be tolerated, right? So we want everyone to feel that investment and that ownership that comes with it. And so we're talking about a lot of like organizational culture stuff as well.
So you mentioned having the new guy do chores, right? They got to take out the trash or do the cooking or something like that. That's been an ethical dilemma for me a couple of times in recent memory. I'm surprised how often I'm the guy replacing the toilet paper in the bathroom at work. And I'm not above it. I'm happy to help, right? But I've started to notice like I'm maybe the only guy who does it. And I kind of want to say something to the new jacks. And at this stage in my life, almost everybody else is a new jack compared to me, right? And I honestly think they think like the custodians do that. Like, I think they think it just magically gets taken care of.
Generational
and I
thing,
don't want to be
probably.
the guy who's like, hey, you could, I don't even have to talk about goddamn toilet paper when I'm at work. I want to talk about finding, the forces of evil and darkness and how we're going to, engage them at work. But instead, I'm taking literally like dozens of rolls of toilet paper to the bathroom. So just, something to think about.
Yeah.
Chores.
Yeah, and there are good customs and practices for the new guys, right? And that's not one of those. Again, it's every organization is going to be a little bit different, but on my team, I'll give you an example of kind of like the chores thing, right? A new guy on my team, there's an expectation that you're going to be the first one in the back of the truck handing out gear, right? When it comes time to hand out gear, or putting gear away when it's time to put gear away. And rest assured that if you're not back up in that truck the minute you get out there, right, someone's going to remind you like, hey, dude, you need to get up there. But that being said, and this is an important piece of it, right, is whoever gets there first, it could be the most senior guy on the team. Like whoever gets there is still going to jump up in the truck and start handing stuff out. Like it's kind of like Jim is saying, like we're not above it, right? Like, and we're not better than that. We're happy to do it. But there is also that expectation that like, hey, I already know where everything goes on the truck, right? And so like, get up there and learn where get familiar with your gear, right? And there's
Get familiar with where the toilet paper is.
well, yeah, that's another thing, I guess. But but that's kind of the thing, right? And the idea is like one of the big philosophies on the team is to look for work, right? And a lot of times we're talking about like on an op, right? If we're out on a SWAT situation, we want everyone to just kind of have their own initiative and find an angle that needs to be covered. Look for work. And it's a similar thing getting up on the truck and putting gear away. Everyone's going to just go look for work. And that's part of it, right? And there will come a point where the new guy, tries to get in the back of the truck to put gear away or to hand gear out. And there's this more senior person up there like, that, dude, I got it. Just relax. And that's how you know you made it. That's how you know you're part of the team. But again, kind of a thing with the chores. I think customs and practices like that aren't necessarily bad. In fact, in an example like that, it shows everybody, right? Like kind of the standards of the team and the culture of the team.
Yeah.
So when we talk about like rites of passage and difficult training, right? And I use the example of like Hell Week for Navy SEALs or whatever, right? But like things like SWAT school and the police academy as well, and I'm sure pilot training and the Air Force Academy, all those things similarly, like they're intended to be challenging. And that's also part of that mental investment as well, right? And like that mental ownership of where they made it to. It's intended to be difficult. And we want people to grow and be resilient. But part of that training is we also need to expose some of their fault lines sometimes, right? And especially when you're looking for things like how well they receive feedback and how coachable they are. But we have to balance that with just making it hard for the sake of it. And Jim kind of mentioned this, but it's like, well, I had to go through it, so everyone else does too, right? Like back in my day when it was hard, your training should not just be arbitrarily a pain in the ass and like serve no purpose, right? It's one thing to say, hey, we want this to be challenging, right? Because we want people to have that sense of investment. But your training and your selection processes should be intentional, right? You need to make a deliberate effort to make sure that it's serving some purpose and that you have objectives that are measurable and repeatable, right? The whole point of those things is to make sure that the people you have are a good fit based on metrics that hopefully you've already identified as valuable and relevant, not because it's a popularity contest or because you like the person really well, right? And if you haven't put the effort forth necessary to develop such a process, you're just making it difficult because you want to be a dick. Like, I'm here to tell you, your process is flawed and you're probably missing out on good or better candidates in a lot of cases. So, and I'd be willing to bet that would be exposed probably other places in the culture of your organization if I had to guess. But related to all of this and kind of part of where I'm going with difficult training and what could be considered hazing, right? Just for making it difficult. It's also important to distinguish, Jim's talked about this a bunch of times, like the instructors who see themselves more as evaluators than teachers, right? Like, are you training? And this is something we talk about in dog training as well. Like, are you training or are you testing? If you're testing somebody, like a selection, right? Figuring out those metrics is one thing. If you're training them, you're trying to teach them or condition certain behaviors or concepts, that's another thing. Your goal is to build them up in that case, not just break them down, right? But you start with the fundamentals, you start adding stuff to it, make it more difficult, add distractions, pressure test it, put it in the wall, and then you dial it back, proof and polish, and then you can evaluate stuff, right? But like, think about all the difficult programs out there in the military, for example. I'm sure there's a lot in law enforcement as well. And I mean, even like anyone who's ever met a Marine, right? Marine Corps basic training, the rites of passage in there. And you have to kind of suss out like what parts of that are maybe on the hazing side and what sides of that are actually.
Yeah. At what point is it a cult initiation? Speaking of the Marine Corps, right?
And I think it's worthwhile just to look in your own, be introspective in your team and say like, what purpose is this training? Is this testing? Is this hazing? Those are and you as an instructor have to be dynamic and be able to shift gears depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish. And you need to be self-aware enough to know which mode you're in, right? There's teaching, training, briefing, educating, conditioning, evaluating. All of those are individual tasks that you as an instructor have to be able to like get yourself into, and they have their own vibe. Yeah.
Right. And just being a dick for the sake of it is not one of them. You got to have a purpose.
Well, and this is like, I mean, in SWAT school, I think about this, and we've had guys on the team that are slowly, they work themselves into that kind of role where they're like, now they're going to start teaching and stuff. And we've had guys go a little heavy on like the, kind of the yelling and it's like, hey, you need to remember, like in 3 weeks, if all goes well, those are your teammates. Like, don't be a dick just for the sake of it, right? Like, you want them to feel like this was worth it, right? Like, and not just like, yeah, I made it to the team, but that guy, fuck that guy. But other thoughts on, Jim was talking about like having the new guys, right? Like pay their dues a little bit. One of the earliest pieces of advice I got from an old SWAT guy when I got on the team is like, there's a pecking order and you got to pay your dues. And at face value, like, yeah, I don't disagree with that, right? Like everyone else has put the work in and got to a point until newer people came in and kind of took those places. And so, yeah, maybe you should be the guy taking out the trash or cleaning the truck or whatever it is. But I also remember a time in my SWAT career when I was pretty new still. We still had this practice or custom back then where every year when there was a taser update, like all the new guys on the team we're supposed to take the voluntary, the quote unquote it's voluntary, like supposed to take a ride. It didn't matter if you'd done it before. You had to do it in front of the team, right? And so people would ride the lightning and get hit with the taser. And that was just like this thing that the new guys were kind of peer pressured into doing. And I remember like I did it. Like I never pressured anyone to do it, but I took the ride, but I thought it was stupid. I'm like, this is dumb. But that was the thing we did back then. And it took some team leader coming back after he got promoted. Usually you get promoted, you go back to patrol. At some point, some of the team leaders, sergeants will come back to the team. And we had some team leaders come back and they were like, yeah, this is dumb. We're going to stop doing that, right? Because like very clearly that falls into the realm of hazing. So there's a lot to like unpack in terms of like what paying your dues actually means. Right. And I just think that organizational culture is a very strong force when it comes to unit identity and cohesion. And we don't want to discount the value of culture and what that means. Right. But there is some like consideration that has to be given to things that are just abusive or humiliating or just for the fuck of it. Right. Like just because. And I remember back then, some of the older guys who had been tased and they just wanted to make sure that they had to do it so everyone else should have to do it, right? Would try to make these like half-ass arguments about like, well, it shows you're willing to take a hit, you know, it shows you're willing to put yourself out there and take one for the team or be a man or you know, whatever it was, right? Like, and by the way, that's when you talk about like masculinity turning toxic, it's somewhere in there, I think is where the line is.
That's when it turns electric.
Yeah. But that's a really dumb argument. And I think it actually took a lot more courage for those team leaders to come in and shock the system a little bit and be like, no, it's time to grow up. Like, this isn't a fraternity. This isn't like football camp. Like, we're professionals here. And by the way, if your process or your selection or whatever doesn't prove that someone's willing to like take one for the team, then your process is flawed. That shouldn't be the way that you look for that. So paying your dues, that's one thing, but think about it in the terms of like what the culture should be versus just trying to make it a thing about tradition and being a thing of the past for the hell of it, right?
So that's messing with the new guys. But when is it right to mess with the new guys? When are we trying to get enough pressure on them that we're building them and making them effective? Because we need people who can handle pressure. We need people who can handle VUCA, volatile, uncertain, chaotic, ambiguous situations, right? We can teach that academically. I can teach you how to box breathe. I can draw it on a whiteboard. I can tell you about the activation of your sympathetic nervous response and how you're going to get fight and flight and adrenaline and epinephrine and cortisone, one of them. I can talk about all that.
Thanks,
and it's
doctor.
great. Yeah. And I can explain all of that. We've done podcast episodes about exactly this thing, and you can listen to that podcast episode 10,000 times. And then when I start shooting at you or punching you in the face, it's different. Right?
Oh yeah.
Some of this you just have to experience, and we really, really don't want an easily overwhelmed cop, because that is a dangerous cop. We do not want a lieutenant under mental pressure flying an F-22, because that is a dead lieutenant. We do not want a frozen soldier, or frankly, lots of other jobs. Think about it. Emergency medical, fire department. There are lots and lots of jobs where we need people of action. Okay? And dealing with that sympathetic nervous response spike, that adrenaline dump, is a learned skill. It is a conditioned behavior. And even once it's conditioned, it's not always perfect, right? Because us humans, we're squishy little critters. We do human things, right? But here's the deal. Fighting is fucking scary. Real fighting is really fucking scary. Like paralyzingly scary. Fight, flight, freeze. We have to condition people not to freeze. And I think back to my own training experience, things that have helped me kind of overcome that, right? There's various boot camp events growing up. There was being a freshman at the Air Force Academy. My experience freshman year at the Air Force Academy was not all that intense. Like, I didn't think it was all that bad. Where it got me was parachuting. So we have a parachute program at the Air Force Academy where you jump out. Your very first jump is solo and free fall. Right? So there isn't a static line pulling your parachute for you, and you're not tandem. You're not attached to somebody, okay? And I had in my head all these funny things I was going to say in the door. I was going to say Geronimo, or I was going to scream like a girl or some shit. And I got in the door, and I remember being so goddamn scared, I couldn't make sound come out. And my jump master looked at me and was like, "Hey, Jim, are you ready to jump?" And there was some litany I was supposed to say, and I was like, right? Yeah. And why do we have a parachute program at the Air Force Academy? It's not because we want to make paratroopers. We don't. It's not because we got to teach you how to eject out of an airplane. We don't. The airplane does that for you.
For you.
Yeah. The reason we have it is character development. It is to teach you to trust your equipment, to trust your training, to trust your jump master or your wingman or whatever, right?
Just trust yourself.
Yeah. And the freshman year system at all the service academies has come under a lot of scrutiny over the last century. There's books about it. There's been congressional hearings about it. And those schools have had to do a lot of introspection about why do we do all the freshman year stuff? Why do we make them, march with their chins in and getting screamed at and doing push-ups all the time? And the best explanation I've seen, which they made us memorize, was the purpose of the fourth class system at the Air Force Academy is to instill those qualities of character and discipline expected of an officer, and that those qualities must be so deeply instilled that no stress or strain will erase them. Right? I gotta have humans who can perform under pressure. Period. Okay? And it turns out I can't just shoot at you. I can't just do a lot of things. I can't just punch you in the face repeatedly. There are rules. Okay, cool. So how do I replicate that stress and strain? How do I get the right amount of stress so that I achieve some level of stress inoculation, right? You've been stressed out in the past, so new scary things aren't nearly as stressful and scary to you. There's a technical term for it, which is easy to mispronounce, eustress. Not to be confused with estrus. Google that one. Eustress is like good stress, positive stress. Sort of like the stress that you're putting on your muscles when you do a push-up, for example. Haha.
Like the opposite of distress.
Yeah. You're putting stress on your muscles for the purpose of growth, right? That's eustress. So that is a positive stress that can be beneficial, motivating, energizing. It is often associated with positive events like achieving goals or experiencing excitement. I'm a big believer in this, right? I think that's a big part of making resilient, tough people. And when I think about resilience programs in the military, the touchy-feely, like, let's learn juggling resilience events do not do a goddamn thing for me. The stuff that actually has done something for me is like doing jujitsu.
For sure.
Right? Putting people under stress and, hey, yeah, this sucks, but you're going to get through it. SEER training, survival, evasion, resistance, escape training. There are some very unpleasant parts of that training. But you know what? When you're done with it, you feel like you're 10 feet tall and bulletproof and like you're going to survive anything, right?
That's going to be the military or other governmental purpose in your hazing definition.
It is for a purpose, right? And, shared misery is a weird but really effective team builder, right? My best friends, other than Mike, in the world are like people I went through really, really nasty training with or combat with, right? And similarly, I'm sure Mike has bonds with his bros on the SWAT team and on patrol because of weird things they went through together. So I have to have some tools to get that adrenaline spike. As an instructor, I have to have something that I can use to just like jam up that intensity level. And it can't be just physical stuff. And this is a thing, like when you're teaching people how to shoot under stress, there's people got a big kick, like, do some push-ups and then run and shoot. And that way you get your heart rate up. Okay, cool. But just getting your heart rate up isn't the same.
Yeah, you're missing the cortisol and adrenaline.
Yeah, you're missing the stress part.
Yeah. And it does contribute to fine motor skills and your proficiency and stuff. It's
Absolutely.
Its own kind of thing.
There's goodness there, but it ain't stress training.
But it's not the same, yeah.
Yeah. The first time you get shot with Sims, you get a little bit of that, right? The first time you get tased, you get a little bit of that, okay? So I need some tools. A couple of ways that I would do that in a training environment is I give lots of instructions and at a very quick pace, quicker than the student could possibly cope with. I give conflicting directions. Stand up. No, sit down. No, stand up. No, sit down. You can't win. There's no winning here. Okay.
Do push-ups.
No, not like that. I displace expectations and I give them emotional ups and downs. Good job. No, you failed. Nope. Good job. No, you failed. Okay. I disrupt their schedule. When they eat and when they sleep. That doesn't mean I don't let them sleep at all. And it doesn't mean I don't let them eat at all. But they're not going to sleep at normal sleep times. And they're not going to eat at normal eat times. I'm going to mess with the schedule. They are also always in a rush. Like there's a literal clock counting down all the time. Change from this uniform into this uniform. You've got 30 seconds. Oh, now you got 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Time is up. Right? Oh, also, I can't add. I can't do math. That's part of the fun, right? I make them multitask. One of my favorites, again, with the physical conditioning stuff was like, anyone can do push-ups, but can you do push-ups while explaining Graham versus Connor? Or while explaining like how a wing works, right? I'm also holding them to a tight standard even when they're under pressure, right? Your uniform has to look good even when 5 seconds after you've been rolling jujitsu. I want to make sure that your uniform looks good, right? And that sounds a lot like boot camp, doesn't it? All the things that I just described are an awful lot like what a drill sergeant or a drill instructor, training instructor, whatever we call them, whatever service you're in, those are all tools that will sound very familiar to anyone who's been through boot camp. Okay. Now, about boot camps, there has been some debate in the last decade or two about police academies and how much they should look and feel like boot camps.
Like the military, the militarization of law enforcement.
I know, right?
Obviously. That's how we've always done it. And so it was hard when I did it. So everyone should have to do it that way.
Yeah. We want warmer, fuzzier cops who can de-escalate, right? So, Mike, what do you think about all that?
Yeah. So I actually have a lot on this. This is a discussion I've had a number of times. And there's so much to it. For starters, maybe one of the most important things just at face value when we talk about wanting warmer and fuzzier cops, you're talking about 21-year-olds in a lot of cases who maybe went to college, maybe not, but they're pretty young and they're coming into this field without maybe a lot of emotional intelligence to begin with, right? And we had a guy on the show, Dr. Dan Bloomberg. He was a researcher, professor. You have to go look for the episode, but we talked about police officer. He co-authored a book called, it was the Power Manual, Police Officer Wellness, Ethics, and Resilience. One of the things he brought up in talking about the military style boot camps and the sorts of behaviors we want out of cops, right? We bring them in and we indoctrinate them to the policing culture with like a drill sergeant style class officer who is modeling this sort of behavior, the drill sergeant thing, right, for the new recruits. And police recruits come from all kinds of backgrounds and walks of life, especially these days, because we're trying to be very, we go out of our way for that. And that's good in a lot of cases and challenging in others. But the point is, they don't know a damn thing about policing. Like, we have to assume they don't know anything about the job or the profession or working under pressure or stress. They maybe have never had to do that sort of thing in their life. And then we bring them into the academy and we expect them to stand at attention and we scream at their face and bark orders and we expect, sir, yes, sir, and obedience and compliance and, right?
Yeah, you're showing them what we want cops to act like, right?
And that's the problem, right? Like, how does that behavior that now we've modeled for them look on body camera when it's a traffic stop or a community interaction and someone has a little bit of an attitude, or maybe it's not even an attitude. Maybe they just like, why'd you pull me over? Like, they ask a question or they push back a little bit, right? Well, it's funny because you could see just that in a lot of cases, right? You see cops get on that kind of high horse, right? The ego thing. That's problematic, right? Now, the supporters of that model, to Jim's points, great points, all stuff, and I agree with all that stuff, right? SWAT school is also similarly kind of boot camp style, right? In terms of adversarial instructors at times. supporters of that model would argue that the intent is to do that stress inoculation stuff, to help them learn how to perform or react while managing stress. And that's fair to a degree, right? But I'd argue there's probably better ways in a lot of cases. Jim talked about some of the things that are great. Time-sensitive decision-making, right? Time-sensitive decision-making, and it's tricky because there's got to be like some sense of consequence, right? If you're trying to really deliver it. So I get it, right? This is one of those like, does making someone do push-ups, or like we have a fire tower down, it's a combined police and fire academy at my work. And so like we'll use that fire tower for extra motivation, go run up and down the tower a bunch of times in kit. But
if I can't make you smart, I will make you strong and fast.
That's right. So here's the thing. It's one thing to condition or desensitize people to that sort of like to getting yelled at, right? And I think there's some evidence to support that noise specifically is a environmental factor that contributes to that like stress response, right? To the cognitive load and task performance that comes with that, right? Loud noises, loud auditory inputs specifically I'm pretty sure there's good research to support that. I'd have to read up on it, but I also, things like visual inputs, like visual clutter, if you have a lot to organize visually, can contribute, and temperature extremes, really hot, really cold. Those are also big ones. But when we contextualize standing at attention and having a campaign hat, one of those drill instructor hats,
Smokey Bear hat,
like screaming in your face, and what that actually teaches you, right? Some will say that policing is a paramilitary organization, and we need to indoctrinate newcomers into a norm of like following orders and this hierarchical nature of like this falls apart, right? Like, it's like, why? Why do we? Because
I said so.
Because they're headed to Normandy next week, or what? Like, they're going to storm a beachhead?
Florence and Normandy. Might be.
Like, they're describing this as like a combat thing, and like we don't really do combat that way, especially when a lot of times cops are getting into shit like by themselves, right? At first. So like, there's a whole bunch of discussion worth having about how our institutionally, how law enforcement is kind of structured that way. But again, I digress. My point is, I believe that performing under pressure is an important skill, and it's one that we should train, right? But we need to do it in a way that's more consistent with job performance. And I think things like time-sensitive decision-making, I think Jim talked about some other great ones like competing interests and priorities, conflicting information, ambiguity, right? Those are all important. And when it comes to managing adversarial interactions and dealing with conflict, right, there's a whole lot that can go into that, more so than what a boot camp style academy is going to give you. Yeah, it's an area that we can do a better job of kind of like building out some of that emotional intelligence and those things. But we do have to deal with the whole managing stress. And I agree with Jim that we've got to actually put them in those situations, right? They need to experience it. You can't teach it in a PowerPoint. We're talking about potentially life-threatening situations. And in those sorts of situations where those fight or flight responses occur, cognitive and rational thoughts will be thwarted by survival-oriented behaviors. So we have to teach people how to mitigate and cope with that. And that is its own skill. It's not something you can just like tell someone about and have it be good.
And when you're doing that intense in-your-face drill sergeant-y stuff, if that's the style of your training, understand the one thing the trainee must never do is sit there. They don't get to freeze, right? You either need to fight or you need to flee. You got to do something. You can't just sit there. You have to take decisive action. You're trying to condition these young people who come from all walks of life with a bias toward action.
Yes.
Okay. And again, it's contextual. There's sometimes you need to slow things down. You need to, smoke a lucky and figure things out. But when the bullets are flying at you, I need you to do something. When the person next to you is bleeding to death, I need you to do something. You don't get to just sit there and rock yourself. There is no Jesus take the wheel in a tactical situation. There just isn't. Okay. So for me in this boot camp thing with law enforcement training, knowing what you're trying to do matters. Again, bias toward action is, I think, one of the big things from this, right? We want people who are not easily flustered. Mike, how many times have you had someone out on patrol get in your face or yell at you or threaten you?
Too many times to count.
85 billion, right?
Yeah, something.
And I need you to be able to go like, yeah, they're yelling at me. That's okay. I can handle that. I've seen worse, right? But it doesn't mean that I want cops to act like little drill sergeants when they're out with the public, right? That's not the behavior we're trying to model. So we can do some boot camp stuff at a police academy, but maybe the whole police academy shouldn't be like that, right? You do it at the beginning, you do it at the end, you do certain individual events that are set up like that. But then you make the rest a little bit more collegial, academic, right?
Yeah, I think like with our SWAT school, it's not a very formal. It's not intended to be boot camp style in that sense, but
we're not marching, but it is.
Yeah, but it's a lot more like the expectations are just high.
Yeah,
and like if you're fucking up, you're going to get yelled at and called on it, but. There's no bit of punishment or consequence that we're not participating in. Like if we're there late running towers, we're there. We're going to do it with you, like,
or your shoes aren't shined enough, right? I can't imagine that's a part of your SWAT school.
No,
right.
It's not
okay.
It was at one time. When I came through SWAT school, there was a like shine your boots thing. Times have changed for the better.
So in this intense training thing, when is it too much or when is it just plain wrong? First off, you got to kind of read the room and you got to read the student. If all you're doing is putting them in the black, right? You're putting them in, vapor lock and they're huddling in the corner. You're probably not doing a whole lot to build them, grow them, teach them, train them, anything, right? So you got to kind of read the students, and every student's going to be a little different. Most real serious military training I've been through has either a psych doc or a psych tech in the room or watching on cameras who can kind of advise like, hey, let's back off student number 5 or whatever, right? I think one of your big warning signs is when you cannot articulate a clear training purpose or when you're doing gymnastics to explain it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why when I was, well, it's a paramilitary organization. Like every time I hear someone say it's a paramilitary organization, I'm like, why though? Like,
yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah. You should be able to answer why 5 times, right? When you're being a dick for the sake of it and you just got to know yourself, at what point are you just taking something out on a student? Okay. It is really easy to get sucked into the role play and group psychology, right? The Stanford prison test or whatever, right? You need, in this training environment, a dispassionate observer to check you. You need somebody who's not an instructor and not a student, who's just there to be like, hey, Mike, how you doing, buddy? I noticed you were really coming down on student number 6. How about you pick another student to pick on tomorrow? Okay. It doesn't take much to overwhelm a student. It doesn't take a whole lot to make them into a lump, a lieutenant under mental pressure, right? You have to set the stress level in a way that actually improves the students over time. And it is okay to overwhelm them as long as you eventually give them a chance to win, right? You can max them out and be like, hey, you failed today. You sucked. Tomorrow be better, and then give them a chance to be better the next day. You're not just trying to crush them, right? Generally speaking, I don't like one-on-one in a lot of ways. Like, don't single an individual student out if you can help it. And if you are in a closed room with one person and just yourself, you're probably asking for trouble. So one, make sure that you leave the door open. Make sure you have either they bring a buddy or you bring a buddy. But generally speaking, I like having at least one other person in the room if we're going to have a isolated session. Generally speaking, I don't like group punishment, with some caveats. One of the things we did when I was a freshman back in the day was, they'd call us out of our dorm into the hallway, and as soon as you got into the hallway, you were expected to be in the push-up position, the front-leaning rest position. And you were chanting, "Sir, we are waiting for our classmates. Sir, we are waiting for our classmates." Now, was that a punishment? Kind of, but one of the big things it was to clue everybody in that the effects of your actions are impacting the group as a whole. And it wasn't, hey, we're doing this because Timmy's late. It was just a standard. You come out in the hallway, you're going to be in push-up position until everybody gets out in the hallway.
Try not to be the last guy. Right? Don't be that guy.
Don't be the last guy. And there is a lot of value in recognizing I don't want to set up the rest of my team to fail. Now, where this gets off the rails is we're all doing a smoke session because, I found a donut in this kid's wall locker or foot locker, whatever, right? Context matters. And I hate it depends. It just depends on everything. I hate it depends as an answer, like it depends on what, right? You got to set a time and a place for it. We're going to do this stress session during this period of time, and then we're going to go back to normal, right? And I mentioned this before, but I think it's worth foot stomping. You got to know when you're teaching, and you got to put students in a certain frame of mind to learn, right? Versus training, which is I'm conditioning someone to respond to a stimulus, versus briefing, I'm making someone responsible for information, versus exercising is in like a drill or an evaluation, right? And then there's like testing. Those are different modes, and you as an instructor have to be in a different mode, and you have to get the student in a different mode. So when we talk about the stress stuff, it's mostly training, right? I am conditioning an organism to respond to a stimulus. So I hear gunshots, I don't just sit there. I hear the whiz crack, the hornet going by my ear. I don't just freeze. I have to do something. I see blood. I have to do something, right? Like we're trying to condition people to respond to stress. And I honestly don't love doing a whole lot of evaluating when I put the pressure on, right? Everyone's going to get overwhelmed. Everyone's going to screw up the task. That is normal human behavior. I'm not sitting there with a clipboard like, oh, he screwed up the cat tourniquet, therefore he shouldn't be able to pass. Like, yeah, we can work on that, right? I need people who will stick with it to get good at putting the tourniquet on under stress, right? So I need the types of people who are willing to improve and willing to stick with it. That's what we're shooting for. So as you're going through all of this, I want you to ask yourself, is how I'm treating the new guys improving our talent management or hurting it? Am I getting a better product on my team? Am I keeping that product on my team? Or am I just making everybody hate each other?
Yeah, I've got just some final thoughts on this. Something that we probably need to touch on here, just on cultural stuff, and onboarding new guys and new gals. We talked about how important team culture and leadership, all that stuff. When it comes to rituals and customs and the potential for hazing, one of the topics that's kind of, I guess, related to that is called canteen culture. And it's a concept that sociologists study.
That's where you put a canteen in a towel and then you hit somebody with the canteen. I learned that at basic training.
It's kind of like the chat around the water cooler. That's referring to like canteen culture as a term.
Not the chat around the shower?
Maybe, okay. Depending on what kind of group you're into. But it's related to the informal attitudes and the norms among a group of people, right? And it's describing the dynamics in a workplace or like in more relaxed social settings. And it's the sort of thing that can help with bonding and coping and camaraderie, right? Like before the briefing starts, when everyone's bullshitting, right? Or while we're waiting for everyone to get back and start the debrief and everyone's just kind of chit-chatting, hanging out. I mean, that could be an example of where you'll see this sort of thing. This canteen culture stuff is good for things like bonding and coping and camaraderie, but there's downfalls too. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because when we think about all of this stuff, rites of passage, hazing, deliberate training, right? There's always, you could be as intentional and deliberate about your formal practices as you want, but there's always going to be a layer of culture, right? And similarly, in a lack of structure, right? You don't have great training, great whatever. You don't have all the boot camp stuff figured out however it needs to be, right? You still have that layer of culture. Like the canteen culture is still going to exist. No matter what, there's always going to be that like kind of secondary informal layer that you need to account for, right? And there's good and bad. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because a lot of the things, military units, law enforcement, fire service, right? Specialized teams have very strong and prominent cultures, and for a lot of good reasons, right? That camaraderie, the bonding, coping, those are good things. And I think we talk about the mental gymnastics that we'll do to try to justify some of those rituals that we might do that maybe are not good, right? The hazing, the drill sergeant, the making training a pain in the ass just because it was that's how it was when I was back in my day, whatever. Like, we're using those forces that we think are really, really good to justify that, but there's a downside to it as well. And so make sure that you're balanced in how you articulate that, right? On the downside, on the good side, you can normalize those good behaviors, right? When it comes to coping and stuff, right? Accountability, emotional intelligence, but it can also be exclusive, right? You can have an in-group and an out-group, the cool kids, not the cool kids. And it can be divisive in the sense of like these new guys come in and they're getting abused and punished and not really feeling welcome to the team, right? And over the long term, what you'll have is a less cohesive, less effective group in the big picture, right? And you can also perpetuate things like resistance to change, corruption, if that's a thing. If people are heavy-handed or racist or insert whatever derogatory, right, you can perpetuate those sorts of behaviors with your culture. And so take the good with the bad, right, and make sure that you are accounting for that in all of the things.
So throughout this, you are setting the vibe. You are setting the culture. You have more say in the culture than it feels when you're just one gear in this machine, right? Culture is powerful. And just like Mike was saying, culture eats procedure for breakfast. You can write all the rules you want, but the culture is what's going to drive the train. When you're training, when you're dealing with the noobs, do it with love. If you're going to screw with them, do it in a lighthearted, positive way, because they're going to remember who the douches were. And you do not want to be one of them, okay? And also do it like it's being filmed by CNN. There are so many cameras in the world. If you're doing something that doesn't look right on camera, that's a clue, right? So do it with love. Don't be a douche. Do it like it's on TV. That's all I got.
We all wear cameras on SWAT operations these days, so if you do something funny, it's going in the Christmas video.
Hell yeah.
It's just accepted. It's just no. You might as well dime yourself out so you know it's coming. Yep. You know?
Yep. If you mess up, fess up.
All right, guys, that's all we got for tonight. This episode is brought to you by 09 Holsters. We talk a lot about people, ideas, and hardware on this show. So when we invest in equipment, we always think in terms of experience first. 09 is helping you figure out how to carry the gear you need to be effective. They are built by cops, for cops, with a minimalist design and bomb-proof durability. Radio cases, flashlights, body cameras, even canine remotes, you name it, 09 has been filling a void in tactical duty holsters for more than a decade. Go see what they offer at 09 Holsters. That's ZERO, the number 9, holsters.com. 09, built to win the fight.
And this is Jim. This episode is also brought to you by Manisex. We've talked a lot about the tactical fantasy on this podcast, and one of the quickest ways to break your tactical fantasies and actually improve your performance is by getting real feedback. One of the ways you can do that is with Manisex. You're not going to get better at shooting on your own. You need practice, data, and coaching. And you need to make the most of your ammo with good live and dry fire training. Manis is a family of training devices that tracks you while you train. It times and tracks everything you do in a drill and coaches you as you go. It is indispensable to taking your shooting to the next level. Go find them on manisex.com.
Don't forget that we put out new episodes on the 1st and the 15th of every month. If you like what we're doing, you can head over to Patreon, give us $1 for each new episode. That money's going to go back into bringing you good content. If you want to interact with us, you could find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at TacTangents. You can also email info@tacticaltangents.com. All right. That's all we got. Good talk.